My name is Esteban Arellano, and this is Utopias. I recently found myself surrounded in a room of white men. From the time I walked in with my two non-white male friends, I felt something in my body, a familiar constriction I've grown accustomed to after a lifetime trying to fit myself into the correct shapes of the white Colorado suburbia where I was raised. I put on my nice smiley mask, defending myself against a storm of non-consensual high fives and hugs, and patiently spelled out every letter of my name only for the name tag to still be wrong. We continued with the experience, but it came to a boiling point when I was in the basement below the room, listening in on a guided somatic practice the men were carrying out. They were invited by the speaker to feel deep into their root chakra and solar plexus and begin to shake to feel more grounded in their bodies. But rather than lingering in the depths of their bodies, which might teach them a thing or two, they then try to flee the scene of the crime. Let who you think you are dissolve. I couldn't really feel the dissolution with the thunder of their chants raining on me from above.
Take the next minute and try not to give a fuck about what you look like. Let your tongue hang out. Just be a little crazy, be a little wild. Let yourself go. Let who you think you are dissolve. Keep going, keep going. Keep shaking. Alright, let's all start to bounce together. Let's try to come into unison. And when your feet hit the floor, you're gonna say, from your belly.
These were supposed to be the good men. They had flocked from their healing practices and non-profits to collaborate on the future of so-called men's work. With the world currently confronting the calamitous repercussions of manhood, they assembled to talk in panels, breakout mastermind sessions, networking cocktail hours, and good old-fashioned brother-to-brother walks. But I'm curious about what happens when white men are invited to feel their feelings and their bodies. Why it can be so difficult for those of us who aren't white men to witness, and whether there must be another way forward. If this is the future of whiteness and manhood, then why did my body still feel some kind of way, and what is to be done about it? They're just weird, my friend would say to me over dinner, as we tried to put a name to this invisible feeling brewing inside us both. She and I spent the day listening to the men speak about where they see manhood going. When we weren't in the interviewer's chair, we spent the rest of the day fielding hugs, questions about our sexuality, stories about how these men are having the best sex of their lives, and even jabs at how one of us reminded them of the lover that stole his wife from him. By all accounts, this convening was meant to name and reshape the state of manhood in America. I was there not as a participant, but a witness, and maybe victim depending on the time of the day. What struck me immediately was their constant invocation of somatics and ancient knowledge systems, the way they chanted in ecstasy as they celebrated the masculine, protector this, warrior that, men of God. They spoke of divine masculine and feminine as eternal, ancient, sacred traits. One man's work was helping other men through the sacred transition of menopause and how to cope with the lack of fucking. Another suggested we should embrace just a little bit of femininity while maintaining our ancient roles as protectors. It has always been this way. Talking shit down in the basement, my friend reminded me that they mean well. They just lack any radical basis in race-class analysis, another said. I fear the divine masculine that they have conjured out of themselves as what keeps white heteropatriarchy alive. What does it mean that many of them are therapists or part of the emerging class of life coaches, all high on the same punch of self-discovery? They write books about how to have the best sex of your life. They realize that maybe their wife who barely speaks up might have something to say after all. I nod along when they say they want men to become more whole, but I wonder what that means. They want identity to be more malleable, a sprinkle of femininity, a dash of cock energy, their term, but still want to keep those binary containers of man and woman and what kind of man and woman exactly intact. The white men are indeed in need of help, but I'm curious about how wounded soft boys continue to distribute harm. While I've grown accustomed to the microaggressions, they reminded me of an episode of couples therapy last season, when Josh, a white man in a polyamorous unit with two white femmes, finally breaks open after a season of narcissism veiled in abandonment issues and anxious attachments. Once you told me the fire story, his partner chuckles, everything made way more sense. Josh tries to tell it as succinctly as possible. In college, he wanted to introduce his three Middle Eastern friends to the American joy of a s'more. They go to the mountains to roast marshmallows, stomp on the small fire, and 16 hours later, the smoke starts rolling into town. The fire burned 2,000 acres of land, $900 million in damages. The police officers pull him from his criminal justice midterm, and justice will be served, to question him for 12 hours. He thinks he is safe. He even laughs with the cops when they ask him if they can corroborate his story. Josh's whiteness blinds him to how things work with the men in blue. The 10 students become the main suspects, and after 4 months, they release their names to the public. And then, Josh pauses for an eternity while his two girlfriends watch him. The court cases begin. The criminal and civil cases drag out for 5 years, with the cops turning to his Middle Eastern friends in particular to see if this was an act of terror. There's lots of significantly more terrible experiences, but it's a unique blend of terrible, he laughs. And now it all makes sense that he has issues being blamed in his relationships. Josh's inability to sit with the consequences of his whiteness mirrors the conference men's rush to dissolution. White men seeking transcendence through appropriated practices has deep roots. A pivotal moment came in 1957 when R. Gordon Wasson, a JP Morgan banker, published Seeking the Magic Mushroom in Life magazine, describing his experience with psilocybin mushrooms during a Mazatec ritual in Oaxaca, Mexico, guided by curandera Maria Sabina. Wasson's article introduced psychoactive mushrooms to a wide audience for the first time and influenced the nascent counterculture in the United States, leading many hippies and spiritual seekers to travel to Mexico in the 1960s in search of the mushroom. The trajectory raises critical questions about cultural appropriation and equity. Maria Sabina suffered tremendously after the Life article's publication. Her community's ecosystem was destroyed by an influx of tourism, her house was burned down, she was briefly jailed, and her community blamed her for revealing sacred practices. All while chemical compounds derived from the mushroom she introduced to Wasson now form part of pharmaceutical products worth billions of dollars, with Mazatec communities receiving no financial benefits from these patents. I am reminded here of a trip to Maine I took with my college friends to trip on psilocybin mushrooms. When we arrived, we discovered our lodgings were in a private residential area, above a family's house. This should have been our first foreshadowing of what was in store for us. We all chew our stems, and it is on our walk through the forest when the trees start to wobble. We make it to the banks of a lake when the only white gay man among us begins to strip off all of his clothes. He spews a litany of insults at the other two women in the group, one of whom is our trip sitter who has to pass her responsibilities on to me in order to wrangle the naked white man going off the deep end in Trump country. I tried to calm him down as he tells me he would never fuck me because I am too feminine and he likes real tough guys. It goes on like this for an hour before he starts to relax. But it's even more startling to hear what comes out of his mouth the more he becomes lucid. For him, the hardest part of his trip was seeing how white his body was after he had shaved. Coupled with this anxiety was a newfound hunger for darker-skinned boys that he had encountered during his study abroad in Israel. He loved how dirty it made him feel to be with them. The state of psychedelics will be on full display this month in Denver for the annual Psychedelic Conference. At the 2023 Psychedelic Science Conference in Denver, Indigenous activists staged a spontaneous protest during the closing ceremony, interrupting MAPS founder Rick Doblin's speech to demand attention for Indigenous rights and representation. 5 speakers criticized the psychedelic movement for tokenism and cultural appropriation, highlighting a fundamental tension. While Indigenous people preserved psychedelic plant medicines for centuries, enabling the scientific discoveries that launched today's psychedelic renaissance, they now have little stake in the commercial industry projected to reach $8 billion in value. The protesters argued that true healing requires centering marginalized voices and protecting sacred medicines from over-commercialization and misuse by inadequately trained practitioners. This same pattern leads me to my research of nightclubs like The Saint and descriptions of ecstasy that were paired with the dream of losing identity and coming together in a union of primitive Eastern fantasies and Western civilization. In videos reminiscing about the club, white men, the ones who survived into older age, remember the feeling well. The space on opening night, the way the lights went out, and Donna Summer's Could It Be Magic began to play. Notice here too how it is often the sexy black diva tasked with leading the white men down to their bodies. The Saint promised its patrons the same euphoria night after night. It was like clockwork. All the gays who looked the same would take the same drugs at the same time and ride the same wave over 12 hours of music spinning. Sound familiar? It was so thrilling, Susan Tompkins, a Saint employee and one of the only women in the videos, recalls. The energy was just amazing. There is no energy like that in the world, I'm convinced. You could send me onto the moon with that energy. The same year that psilocybin was discovered by the gringos in Oaxaca, Jack Kerouac was going on his own adventure across America. In his drug rampage classic On the Road, he stops in my hometown of Denver, Colorado, quoting, "At lilac evening, I walked with every muscle aching among the lights of 27th and Welton in the Denver colored section, wishing I were a Negro, feeling that the best the white world had offered was not enough ecstasy for me. Not enough life, joy, kicks, darkness, music, not enough night. I wished I were a Denver Mexican, or even a poor overworked Jap. Anything but what I was, so drearily, a white man disillusioned." Searching the very white and very male genre of addiction memoirs, Maggie Nelson uncovers a buzz of white anxiety and racialized tropes that begin to, quoting Toni Morrison's Playing in the Dark, surface endlessly when one begins to look carefully. One of the most common tropes is the wanderer, longing to leave behind their spiritually empty, deficient whiteness to actually feel something, often through contact with mixed company. These real-life encounters record fantasies of the other that elevate them to a mythical status, outside of time, back to antiquity, to where the white man is eager to flee. They're so hell-bent on losing their body, ditching the thing that aches with pain until they can become nothing. That is not a luxury that we have ever known, nor is it even a horizon that we pursue. On a lunch break from the men, my friend reintroduced me to the work of Resmaa Menakem. I had first come across his work in Somatic Abolition about a year ago, but returned this week to an interview on the Sounds True podcast. He and the host, Tammy Simon, are in the middle of their interview when she says it hurts her to hear that, quote, "the black body is not fully human in our world." He pauses and asks her to look for that hurt in her body. It's in her heart. It's a kind of ache, and then it moved and changed. Menakem taps into the feeling. She describes it as a dull ache. Underneath that, she feels righteous, ready to call bullshit on his words. Here is where Menakem hovers. What does it feel like to be red? Many of us who have acted out at one point in our lives or another would know, especially those of us whose proximity to the universal center of whiteness, manhood, wealth, citizenship, and ability might require us to rethink the stories we tell about the world and ourselves. It's a feeling that we see unfold over Zoom between the psychotherapist and a white woman in her feels. The white body is, of course, a feeling body, just like the rest of ours. But when charged feelings about identity land in them, Menachem illuminates how the electricity gets blown through their bodies and into ours. It's time to feel for yourself. You are alive, goddammit. We are all. There's a deep trauma inside of us that cannot go undone if we want to stay here. I spent the last few months, years, feeling really, really tense all over my body. I sometimes feel like I'm suffocating in my own skin. It's like all my skin and organs and bones are imploding into each other. I just went to physical therapy, and she told me that I am holding an ungodly amount of tension in my third eye chakra, which might be making my neck seize, which might be making it impossible to breathe or speak or feel. That feeling only gets worse when I feel your hands on my shoulders, when you drown in the act of spelling my name, and it still breaks my heart to feel so apart from you. It won't be sustainable to keep building walls between you and me if we want to make it out alive. Our only option is to figure out how to be together. I, like Tammy too, feel embarrassed at the thought of being seen in my own naivety. I am still negotiating the role I play in this world as someone who is both racialized and white, depending on the space I enter. But Menachem is gracious as he handles her feelings that she has now thrown back to him, to all of us watching at home. He plays a role that so many of us have had to do and only some choose to, teaching you about what it feels like to be us. We live in a fairly new world together as so-called humans, so it only makes sense that there is still learning to be done. This is where somatic abolitionism emerges, not just abolishing white body supremacy cognitively, but spending time to abolish it in the body first. As Menachem explains it, we must start with the construct of white body supremacy. These bodies are the supreme standard by which all bodies of humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically. There is a collective unconscious that buoys the idea of the subhuman, and nearly all of our bodies, bodies of all culture, are infected by the virus of white body supremacy. In DEI trainings, the ask is often for BIPOC people to come and teach what it's like to be in our shoes. When Resma asked Tammy to look for what's just below the hurt, he's modeling what multiple intelligences look like, not just cognition as the primary intelligence that crowds out everything else, but vibratory intelligence, the knowledge that comes from feeling. But what's not said in the room is that you are diversifying from the white male body being the standard. Inclusion, but inclusion into what? Somatic abolitionism treats these practices as toys rather than tools, because looking at it as tools is like intelligence hoarding for something that needs to be fixed. It's also important to be able to distinguish between clean pain and dirty pain. Throughout moments across time, people have looked to escape their white bodies, jumping downstream to the bodies marked by their deviation from the white body standard, which have become dumping grounds. We have become dumping grounds. How do we address the damage done by white people choosing comfort over feelings? We are down here in the basement, kikiing while they storm upstairs. They scream about the divine masculine and feminine. Abstraction, abstraction, abstraction. There's nothing divine about gender, one friend screams to me. They lack a radical analysis that brings in race and class. They congratulate themselves on the millions they've invested into this work. The only women they know and love are their mothers, wives, and daughters. Utopias is the conversation down here. It's critique. It's talking shit. It's knowing that it won't get better but hoping it will, and dreaming that one day it'll come. I write all this maybe from a place of jealousy for feeling so free in your body. It's true that while I have been drawn to felt encounters, I often look at it from a distance, from my desk chair in the house I rent in the gentrified Elysian Heights neighborhood. I am invested in what Jose Esteban Munoz calls utopia as a way to feel the feelings of the here and now, ingrained in us from generations of trauma and hope, and use them as a way towards a more relational future. It's about being singular plural, a joining of self and others through sensation, through performance, through art, through existence. Munoz writes, the singularity that marks a singular existence is always coterminously plural, which is to say that an entity registers as both particular in its difference, but at the same time always relational to other singularities. A lot of big words that ask us, how can we feel our singular feelings and use that to connect to the plural of one another? What would it mean for us to feel together? What would somatic abolitionism look like as a practice that doesn't abstract away from the material conditions that make some bodies more available for feeling than others? The white men upstairs are indeed hungry to feel whole, but their attempts to rid themselves of their identities through somatic practices often end up reinforcing their hegemony even as they run from their identity. Despite their best intentions, their inner stories still rear their heads because abstraction, that act of putting their sensations into words, becomes the only form they know. Down here in the basement, we're figuring out what it means to feel without extraction, to be present without appropriation, to be whole without becoming everything. This is the work of being singular plural, feeling our particularity while remaining accountable to the world that shapes us. This experience has made me more aware of the way the world around me lands in my body. Feelings are things that are constantly in the air, dancing between you and me. The way I feel the world is an inventory of traces made by the people that I've met. Some of the most beautiful experiences of my life and learning have come from the feelings that are shared between us. In a white body supremacy world, the comfort and experience of white male bodies are often foreign to me, as I'm constantly latched to my body through the range of sensations, from ecstasy to panic, from masking to holding my breath clenching in. The uncomfortable feeling I carried throughout that weekend was familiar indeed. The same constriction from growing up in this body around these people all the time. This was all I knew until I left and saw more of the worlds being built against the grain of a white-bodied world. I learned this from my own family too, an assemblage of 4 people who never needed a man to be protecting us. It is dawning on me as I write this that my discomfort around white men losing control may also come from a lack of men throughout my life. I felt lucky as a child to not have a father, because then I would have the space to be my own person. And yet, I am fully invested in a world with men, even feeling white men. In his work, Menachem says that this is not a set of tools but a toy box, an endless practice of experimentation and revisions that include feelings that come up inside of you, and under that, and under that, and under that. What is the part that you feel like you can't say? What actions do others ignite in your body? How can you lean into what Menachem calls the clean pain of encountering one another and navigating the oceans of feelings that we both radiate between each other? There are worlds down here that exist that you cannot even fathom, but they do not just disappear under generations of erasure. These memories of ours and our ancestors accumulate in our bodies, and the only way forward to the future is one that tries to build links between each of these worlds in the hopes of making a constellation of people, stories, and legacies together. The beauty of life has been the full spectrum of all of these that accumulate in our body in our ever more connected world. I'm trying to feel the feelings that keep me locked in its grip. It's a feeling of being surrounded, but also of surrounding each other.